and is one of the world's most powerful cars. An engineering marvel. And quite possibly the most advanced electric vehicle that few have heard of.
That we are still even around, it's a big miracle.
Built on bytes rather than bolts, Rimac Automobili is the dream of just one man. Its very first production car could change the fate of an entire country, and perhaps even transportation itself.
Rimac just sort of blindsided the entire automotive industry.
The marque catches the world off guard by attempting to produce an electric supercar. And along the way, somehow takes the reins of legendary French automaker Bugatti.
Who is this guy? What is he going to do with Bugatti? That's amazing. Like, that is shocking.
This is the story of a daring dream from an unlikely location, cutting-edge technology, and a bold gamble to create the ultimate all-electric supercar. It launches from 0 to 100 in less than 2 seconds. It's a top speed of 412 kph and is capable of running for over 500 kilometers on a single charge. The all-electric Rimac Navara.
We're at the beginning of the electric motor in cars, and clearly Rimac has figured out something that everyone else doesn't know.
It's a vehicle defined by numbers that features 4 electric motors delivering motion independently to each wheel, which together produce 1,914 horsepower. Could this vehicle usher in a new age for cars?
This shouldn't be happening. We're in a new world where cars are now computers.
A new motoring world where competitors can emerge from unlikely places.
For the vast majority of the history of the automobile, it's been impossible to become a new automaker.
To build its very first serialized production car, Rimac will need to create an entire business from scratch, engineer a new type of high-performance vehicle, and hand-assemble it in a country with no previous car manufacturing experience.
We are kind of like, jumping out of a plane without a parachute, and while you are falling, you are building the parachute.
Most people have never seen or heard of this man. Yet what takes place inside this garage might well alter the entire automotive landscape.
This is the garage where a lot of the magic happened.
This guy came out of nowhere in his 20s and created something that all of the traditional automakers just didn't even think was possible.
Thinking back and seeing these pictures, how we built these crazy batteries, the interior of the car, all the electronics, that was actually the most fun part for me. And without big obligations, without thousands of people relying on me doing my job.
Mate Rimac is a man with an all-electric vision for high performance.
When we were building the first cars here, I was really young and didn't know much about high voltage systems, and it was a very new field, and I got electrocuted many times.
Building a multi-million-dollar business out of a garage is fairly typical in Silicon Valley. It's something else entirely if Croatia is home.
We are in the middle of nowhere when you look at the automotive world. In Croatia, the company started by a 20-year-old guy without any automotive experience.
Mate Rimac's journey into the supercar space begins like a lot of wide-eyed technology dreamers. A passion project that helps usher in a revolution, an automotive revolution.
And I always wanted to do something with cars. In high school, I was already building stuff myself. I wrote my first patents. I was the national champion for electronics. But then when I had an 18th birthday, I bought a 1984 BMW 3 Series because that was like the easiest way to start racing.
Mate's youthful need for speed changes his destiny and perhaps Croatia's future.
That was my first steps into racing. And I did that for like a couple of times, and then the combustion engine blew up.
Without a functional engine, Mate is faced with a choice: rebuild or reimagine.
I was thinking about making an electric car for quite some time. I was always fascinated by Nikola Tesla, who was also born in Croatia.
Nikola Tesla is one of the fathers of modern electricity. In the late 19th century, he duels American Thomas Edison to define how humanity will harness electrons. In 1887, Tesla files a series of patents for generating electricity using alternating current. Many of today's electric motors rely on the same basic principles.
Instead of just replacing the combustion engine with another one, why not combine my two passions and make an electric car that's not just environmentally friendly, but also exciting and fast?
Inspired to try something new, Mate starts tinkering.
But after every race, I kept coming back and improved the car. The car became faster and faster. I would have lots of problems. The battery would blow up. We started to win races, which was the first time in history that electric car won races against combustion engine cars in the same category.
In 2009, while still at university and with nothing to lose, Mate founds his namesake company.
I was all in, like a gambler. Like, I had nothing to lose. Like, this was my life.
Starting a brand new car company from scratch is hard. Trying to do it in a place with no automotive industry is daunting.
So it was really building everything up from scratch, and most of the stuff just learning by doing, making lots of mistakes. And I had no idea what I was doing at the beginning. I was just a guy in a garage.
A guy in a garage who happens to have a dream to create an all-electric hypercar. In a world with numerous supercar options, hypercars stand out because they represent the most extreme, expensive, and rarefied high-performance motoring vehicles.
I didn't do it from an environmental standpoint. I was like, that's a nice side effect, nice consequence. But using the potential of the electric motor to make a car really powerful, exciting, fast, and combine, all the advantages of the electric powertrain, starting with a blank sheet of paper, that was the idea when I started 13 years ago. When I was telling my friends, which are all car guys, what I wanted to do, I'm very systematic. So I made a little brochure. Look, I want to make an electric car. And they were like, oh, are you absolutely nuts?
At the time, the idea of an ordinary electric car seems implausible, let alone an all-electric hypercar.
Electric cars at that time were a joke. Everybody was looking at me like an absolute nutcase. Even my parents were like, my mother was telling me, finish your college, find a normal job. What are you doing?
It takes a lot of passion to launch a startup, all-electric supercar company in an unusual setting. Yet, can Mate Rimac pay for it? Since its inception, the car industry has largely been built by dreamers and schemers. In 2009, Mate Rimac is no different as he launches his own car company.
It was so difficult, especially at the beginning, to raise money. Investors didn't want to invest. They didn't know any successful company out of Croatia.
Mate's decision to retrofit his race car with an electric motor places him at the cutting edge of the electric vehicle movement. Yet finding funding is tough.
Everybody was like laughing at me because at that time people never saw an electric car, let alone an electric race car.
Finally, in 2011, he lands his first bit of investment capital.
Investors basically knew that I was with the back against the wall, and they said, like, if you want to continue doing this, you have to move to the Middle East. And I was like, you know what? I really want to do this in Croatia. I want to show it's possible to do this here.
To prove both his idea and its location, Mate pushes his team to build a real-world concept.
The most difficult thing when we started designing the Nevera was the fact that we had to design not only the car itself, but also the components that go inside. So we literally started with a blank sheet of paper.
Adriano Mudri is the head of Rimac's design and the man responsible for the marque's visual identity.
So imagine you're a big pasta fan, you ate all the pasta around the world. Now you say, okay, I want to be a chef, I want to cook my own pasta. So you write down the perfect recipe, and then you want to go to the shop and you want to buy flour to make the dough. But the recipe is so unique, you can't even buy the flour. So what you have to do, you have to start your own farm and start growing the weed. And you haven't even started with the secret sauce.
The company's secret is technology. So the team sets out to build what they need from the ground up.
We didn't only have to build it, we had to develop it, we had to engineer it properly.
There is a first mover advantage, and that's because technology moves at the speed of software. If you move the way a software company does, which is quickly relative to a traditional car maker, which is slowly, there's a big advantage to being first. And I think that's what we're capitalizing on with Rimac.
Engineers set to work to meet the daring goal of finishing the prototype in time for the 2011 Frankfurt Car Show.
We were like just locked up in that facility, working day and night, Saturdays and Sundays, sometimes not going home for days, sleeping on the floor.
Just as the team charges ahead, another problem jolts them.
We were running out of money. The guys I just convinced to start working for me, I couldn't pay them. I couldn't pay the rent. The landlord was throwing us out. The electricity company cutting our electricity.
Nothing stops an electric car manufacturer like having its power cut off. Yet the team is still able to overcome the bump in the road when they debut the C1 prototype at the Frankfurt Car Show.
I can't help but think that if Rimac's first couple of cars sold extraordinarily well, we'd be looking at another Tesla story.
Only 8 C1s are built, and they don't sell particularly well. However, the vehicle does showcase the company's cutting-edge technology.
The only way for us to survive was to start working as an engineering company to other manufacturers. We were developing cars or batteries and powertrains for various car companies, which was still super difficult, and we were still sleeping on the floors. And on the side, we were still developing our car, the Concept 1, when we had a little bit of extra time and extra money.
The dot-com-like pivot transforms Rimac from a startup automaker into a technology company. The marque begins supplying parts to mainstream players like Aston Martin, Jaguar Land Rover, and Renault.
I think The brilliance of Rimac's strategy is they will sell to the big guys. And ultimately, they're so far ahead of the game that they can tell the traditional automakers, hey, come here and buy our technology, rather than trying to copy us, because they will never catch up.
In 2022, Rimac lands investments from venture capital giants SoftBank Vision Fund 2, Goldman Sachs, and Porsche. Just 13 years after starting, Mate Rimac's company is now valued at 2 billion euros.
Elon took his Tesla product, showed it to the world, blew all of our minds, and now they're everywhere. Mate's strategy looked to be a little bit different. He made that hypercar that got everyone's attention, because I think the strategy here is to become a supplier working behind the scenes to help traditional car makers up their electric game.
The influx of capital helps Rimac become one of the few high-tech manufacturers in Croatia, and also reinvigorates Mate's hypercar dream. Now the company's challenge is to design, engineer, and develop its first flagship production vehicle. But is that realistic when the marque has never been a volume manufacturer? Initially, electric cars are a curiosity. Now they're a revolution that's reimagining the entire automotive industry.
I think all of the traditional automakers are petrified right now.
Being a historic motoring marque no longer guarantees survival. New tools and technology are allowing Rimac Automobili to battle the conglomerates. Now, the marque needs to put theory into practice.
The car is super complicated. Aerodynamics, performance, ergonomics, speed, all of that stuff needs to work together. And with Nevera, we had such a high bar for what we wanted to achieve.
To go higher, the team must craft a cutting-edge technical package. The key is harnessing the power of electric motors.
Electric motors all work in the same way. It's electromagnetics. Basically, you're using electricity to make a magnet to pull something in one direction.
A conventional internal combustion-powered car has just one engine. The Navara has 4 motors, 2 independent units in the front and 2 separate ones in the rear.
We have 4 independent powertrain systems in the car. It's like having 4 engines in a traditional car. You could actually take this car apart and make 4 powertrains for other cars.
The 2 electric motors at the front offer a combined 400 kilowatts of power, while the 2 electric motors at the back are more than twice as potent, delivering 900 kilowatts combined. All those kilowatts add up to 1,914 horsepower. That's 5 times as much horsepower as a base Porsche 911. The reason the front and rear motors offer different power outputs is due to physics.
If you remember when you were a kid and when you pedal really hard on your bike, you'll pull a wheelie, and the harder you accelerate, the more your weight goes rearward.
When the Navara launches hard off the line, the car's center of gravity shifts towards the rear of the vehicle.
The more weight pressing down on a tire, the more grip it has. And the harder you accelerate, the more of the car's weight winds up on the rear wheels. So it only makes sense that Rimac would put more powerful motors on the rear than on the front, because under full acceleration, a lot of that weight has come off the front, and any extra power would just do nothing but spin the tires.
At max power, the 4 electric motors are capable of pushing the Navara over 412 kilometers per hour.
You can control each wheel separately. We do that hundreds of times per second. These 4 electric motors give you a huge advantage in cornering.
When the Navara enters a turn, it can decelerate each inside wheel at a different speed, while accelerating each outside wheel separately. This allows the vehicle to turn into the corner faster than a conventional car. The system calculates how much power to send to each wheel over 100 times a second. Yet the 4 independent electric motors have an added benefit. They enable regenerative braking.
When you hit the brake, it can absorb almost 400 kilowatts of power through the battery without using the friction brakes. So you really rarely use the friction brakes unless you are on a track. And we try to have this crazy acceleration.
The Navara can accelerate from 0 to 100 kph in under 2 seconds.
Car guys are lamenting the end of the internal combustion engine because we love the way they sound, they feel, and they shift and all that. But when it comes to speed, there just is no contest. Electric motors are instant, they're silent, and nothing will keep up with an electric car. This is insane stuff. I mean, the fact that you can now accelerate only as fast as your car's tires can grip, we're in crazy town.
The Navara's electric motors also allow the vehicle to act like several different cars in one.
It can be just front-wheel drive, just rear-wheel drive, any combination in between, or you push the button and all of a sudden it's a drift machine.
It's the dawn of an entirely new supercar era, where computer code defines the entire driving experience. The Navara's telemetry system collects more than 4,500 data signals per second. During a single hour, the car's supercomputer processes 6 terabytes.
I never thought I'd see the day where 2,000 horsepower is something that could even exist. And that's something that can only exist because of electric cars.
Electricity is radically altering all kinds of cars. However, electric motors are only as good as their energy source. To revolutionize hypercar high performance, Mate Rimac and his team of engineers need to reinvent something that we all take for granted: batteries. The solution is to create one of the largest battery packs in the entire car industry.
It has 120 kilowatt hours of energy, which is huge for such a small car.
At 120 kilowatt hours, what that means is capacity. That's like talking about the fuel tank. How big is the fuel tank?
The battery isn't just big, it's also fast. The unit can recharge to 80% capacity in just 18 minutes.
This is one of the largest battery packs in production right now, which is insane.
Unlike traditional combustion-powered cars, which rely on burning fossil fuel, electric vehicles deploy energy from battery packs. From the outside, the pack looks massive. But on the inside, it's actually comprised of nearly 7,000 individual power cells.
The cells in the Navara, they are concept-wise identical to what you have in your TV remote.
The only difference is we ask them to deploy an unbelievable amount of current. If you can imagine asking your cell phone to dump its battery in an hour, That's something that can happen in electric cars.
At high speed, the Navara consumes energy very quickly. To make that possible, the engineers investigate hundreds of different battery layouts. The majority of today's electric vehicles place their battery packs at the bottom of the car. This puts the bulk of the weight low to the ground.
If you sit on top of a battery, that means the seat moves up, that means the roof moves up, and it doesn't have good aerodynamics.
Engineers must find a better way to distribute the battery's weight.
So we experimented with hundreds of different layouts, and we decided for an H shape.
Creating an H-shaped battery pack places the power cells in between and behind the occupants, putting the mass in a low, central position. That's something that's great for handling and high performance.
The cell is a lithium-ion chemistry. The way we monitor the cell health gives us an opportunity to extract that extra bit of performance while still keeping safety in check.
Safety's paramount for an upstart automaker proving its worth on the world stage. The process starts inside a supercomputer before heading to the real world.
In total, we needed 11 cars for 45 speed crashes.
Intentionally wrecking 11 cars during development doesn't sound all that bad. However, destroying an electric car is very, very different than a combustion-powered car.
Several of the tests are required to have the battery full charged. So basically, when you crash an electrical car, you're really crashing the real thing.
Combustion engine crash tests are relatively safe because the fuel tank is intentionally filled with a non-explosive fuel substitute. But an electric vehicle crash test raises the stakes thanks to the lithium-ion batteries. They burn hotter and longer and require tens of thousands of gallons of water to extinguish. This is why airlines are so afraid of batteries in checked luggage.
The guys have firefighters trucks and everything. They are prepared for the worst. But thank God, after the crashes, the batteries work perfectly without any major damage.
Ensuring that every battery pack works perfectly requires a dedicated assembly team inside the Rimac factory, where each Navara battery pack is hand-assembled.
What you have to do at the beginning is sort cells. Your weakest cell is basically your weakest link in the whole chain, so you want to make sure that you don't have weak cells in the pack.
Once the cells are sorted and tested, it's time to laser weld them together.
The cells are being put together into a module, laser welded to each other with connection plates, with the sensors inside to measure voltage and temperature, with the cooling systems.
When each module is finished, it's transferred to the final build room, where technicians assemble the Navara's 120 kilowatt-hour battery.
When it comes to energy, it has 120 kilowatt hours, which is enough for a daily need of 4 households in the US.
Those battery management systems are crucial because the Navara's battery can deliver 1.4 megawatts of electricity. That's enough energy to instantaneously power over 750 homes.
The pack is being assembled, all the cooling lines, the high voltage connections, the low voltage connections, the battery management systems, and so on.
The Navara's battery is a massive step forward for the hypercar space and a harbinger for what will happen in the entire automotive industry.
Here behind us is a production line that will produce 50,000 batteries per year. We are producing batteries for like 10 different car companies. Our know-how in technology and the work we are doing here is going to impact a lot of more people.
Impact is everything in the hypercar game. Yet for a vehicle to truly stand out, it can't just rely on high-performance stats. It also needs a stunning exterior. For the Rimac Navara to truly make waves, it must define a new hypercar style. A process that begins inside the company's design studio.
When we started, everybody thought, yeah, this is a moonshot. It's gonna be impossible to achieve. But there's only 2 days in the year that you cannot work. Yesterday and tomorrow. The initial conversation for the Navara itself was pretty straightforward. We created tons of sketches. Everything else was purely virtually developed.
The virtual design process allows for faster iteration while also taking advantage of the game-changing technology.
So the proportions of the Navara are very unique. We have motors on the front, motors on the rear, and a big battery inside. Usually hypercars, they're mid-engine cars, so the cabin is always pushed forward, and that always creates this typical hypercar shape. But on the Navara, we knew immediately, because of the powertrain, we could actually place the cabin right in the middle.
Where the motors sit in the chassis not only allows designers to place the cockpit directly in the center, but also helps define the vehicle's profile.
You have these big muscles on each wheel, and then this long, sleek cabin that sits almost right in the middle of the whole car. And that not only creates the perfect aero balance, but also the perfect weight balance.
Aerodynamics are important for every supercar, but perhaps even more important for an all-electric one.
Aerodynamics are always a very big issue when you're dealing with high speed. And by high speed, I mean really high speeds.
The aerodynamics on this car are completely different. Why? Because we don't have a big combustion engine. 66% of the fuel that it burns is actually heat. So we don't have to dissipate that much heat. But the aerodynamics and cooling performance we need to achieve with our car has a different set of criteria.
Aerodynamics takes place in both of these fields, in design and in engineering. The biggest challenge in development of Navara was set of targets. We had extreme speeds, 412 kilometers per hour, and on another side, very long range for city driving.
Developing an electric vehicle that excels at high speed or long range is relatively easy. However, doing both in the same car is really hard.
Since it's an electric car, we wanted it to be super efficient so you can go further.
And we had to develop active aerodynamic systems.
The active aero system utilizes 4 movable flaps to control how air travels in and around the vehicle.
We use supercomputers for calculation of entire domain around the vehicle, and we use more than a few hundred cores per each simulation run.
Calculations can point in the right direction, but when it comes to aerodynamics, eventually the team has got to test their theory in a wind tunnel.
Each and every surface was optimized to meet all the performance targets. This art is art of engineering and art of design.
The hard work pays off. The aerodynamic team is able to increase efficiency by 30% over the prototype. Yet it's how they cool the internal battery system that's the challenge.
Navara is a full electric vehicle, and main challenges there were cooling of the battery systems.
Keeping the batteries cool is far more challenging than on a traditional combustion-powered car, because the operating temperature between the batteries and the ambient air is very similar.
The battery itself should not exceed 50 degrees of Celsius. Why is that tricky? Because the air temperature and the coolant temperature of the radiator, there is not a big difference.
On a typical high-performance combustion-powered car, the engine might run at 100 degrees Celsius, while the air temps hover around 30. That large range makes cooling the engine relatively easy. On the Navara, the air and the batteries live at nearly the same temperatures, making it hard to properly cool.
We're still at the infancy of electric cars, and heat management is an issue that will continue to become less and less so.
Keeping your batteries running cool is critical for an electric vehicle. However, if the Navara is truly going to rewrite the hypercar rules, it'll also need a futuristic factory.
The level where we are now, considering our starting in a little garage with no funding, no know-how from Croatia, it's a pure miracle. I feel like we just built the foundations to now really go big.
After 13 years of toil, this under-the-radar company is finally ready to establish itself as a major player. From bytes to bolts, the process of handcrafting a new Rimac Navara begins inside the 25,000 square meter final production hall, where it'll take 8 weeks to build a single car.
The fact that we are building hypercar in Croatia, I think it's quite amazing.
"260 dedicated technicians work in this factory.
Here we have the final assembly stations. It's 2 separate production lines with 4 stations each.
Final assembly begins at Station 0, where mechanics bond over 300 fixing points to the monocoque.
After that, we move the panels and the monocoque into the paint shop.
Next, the bodywork is sent to the paint shop, where specialists color each car. Then it's time to bring everything together at final assembly. Unlike highly automated car factories, it's all done by hand. And there are just 4 stations.
Then the car starts here on this line with first integration of the wiring harness and big high voltage components. And as it goes through the line, the car gets more and more finished.
After that, we are moving to the Zone 2, which is where we install both powertrains together with a crash structure.
Once the process is completed, the car heads to Station 3, where the massive 120 kilowatt-hour battery is bolted into place.
Zone 4 is dedicated for all the exterior and interior parts.
The entire assembly is remarkably industrialized for a boutique manufacturer.
We want to prove to our big car company clients that we know how to build properly, even though it's small volume production.
On November 2nd, 2021, the company's success at limited production and its technical expertise with electric vehicles takes a dramatic turn when Rimac takes over Bugatti, one of the most famous car manufacturers in the world.
Mate's on everyone's radar because you don't hand the keys over to Bugatti unless the guy's really amazing.
We also have now the responsibility for Bugatti, and which is an immense opportunity. The company was founded exactly 100 years before Rimac was founded, so now I have the responsibility for a 113-year-old brand, one of the strongest brands in the world, which basically invented the hypercar and has been the golden standard of hypercars and supercars ever since.
You know when you're watching a movie and you have that, oh my God, what just happened moment? That was the moment when we found out that the Volkswagen Group had handed over the keys to the Bugatti castle to Mate Rimac. This doesn't happen. And now those keys are handed over to a young guy from Croatia that no one knows. And that is the biggest surprise in the last 20 years.
The combined company is rechristened as Bugatti Rimac, aligning one of the most celebrated historic motoring names with one of the newest. At its core stands the vision of just one man, CEO Mate Rimac.
When you look back through the history of the automobile, some of the most significant achievements came from companies that had one person at the helm who were dead set on beating someone else. And that goes to Honda, Ferrari, and Lamborghini, and Lotus. All of these car companies were run by one person with a singular vision. Mate was young and had a vision of transforming the supercar world into electrons, and he did it.
The Bugatti Rimac Navara has already changed Croatia. However, it's an open question whether it can change the car industry as well.